I haven't done a YouTube video in a long time, but there's something that it is Cervical Cancer Awareness Week in the UK, and this is something that I really wanted to talk about because last year I had my own cervical cancer experience, and basically about a year before that I'd always had like problems, but a year in the February things started getting really bad. Like I was having a lot of stomach pain, I felt bloated all the time, and there was nothing. I started bleeding every 2 weeks. I felt like I constantly had like pains, and I went to the doctor and they just went, okay, well, we're gonna have to put you back on the pill and we're gonna see how that goes. So they put me back on the pill. It didn't work. It didn't get any better. I mean, at the time I wasn't sort of particularly sexually active, but when I was, it was painful, and you know, but they put me back on the pill and it didn't get any better, and I started to become quite anemic, and I went to the doctors and they said, oh well, we think you've got endometriosis, and you know, because you don't want any more children, we're not even going to investigate it for you. We're just going to give you the drugs, and you know, that'll help. And then she took some bloods as well, and that's when I found out that I had anemia. And they also found out that well, I tested positive for polycystic ovaries. So I had to go to the hospital and I had to go and have some scans, and they said everything's normal. We can't find anything wrong with you. You've got no cysts. We don't know why you've tested positive for this. You're totally fine. Everything looks healthy. It doesn't look like you've got endometriosis. You look totally fine. You just need to go back to your doctor. So I went back to the doctor, and I was like, at this point, I was like, I feel so rough all the time. I can't like cope with this. We've tried the pill, it hasn't worked. We've tried the injection, it hasn't worked. I can't have the implant because the injection didn't work. I don't know what to do anymore. So they said, go and have a coil fitted. And you know, while all this was going on, you know, I'd been for my smears. I've always been very much like, it's really important to go, and I'd had one like 2 years before and it had all been fine. I'd never had an abnormal result, nothing. And so they tried to fit a coil and they couldn't do it. They could not do it. It is the most painful, one of the most painful experiences of my life. And they said, we just can't do it. We can't get your cervix to dilate. We can't fit it. We can't do it. This is, you know, this is really unusual, but you're not suitable. You need to go back to your doctor. So I went back to my doctor again, and he said, right, I'm going to recommend for you to go and have ablation, which is where they burn off the lining of your womb. So I was like, brilliant, that sounds great, that sounds like it'll do the job, whatever. So I got a consultant's appointment, and I went and I explained the history, and I explained that I didn't want any more children, and that, you know, I was really adamant about that. And I'd you know, previously, after I had my son, I'd previously asked to be sterilised, which is something that they don't do anymore. He said, right, well, the consultant said, right, well, we can do that, but you'll have to take birth control as well, and which was something that I didn't want to do anymore. Or he said, or you can just have a hysterectomy, because, you know, it's actually, oh, sun's right in my face. it's actually quite dangerous for you to have any more children, because I have congenital hip dislocation, which means that I could, like, technically, I've already done more damage to my hips by having children, but I could do a lot more, and they didn't recommend any more pregnancies. So you can just have a hysterectomy. And I'm only 30, so it's quite unusual for them to agree to that. But they kind of went, oh, you've suffered enough, you know, I'm going to sign you up for this. And I actually cried with relief. And he is still my favourite person in the whole entire world. And so March last year, I went and had my hysterectomy. And before that, I had to go to a consultation. And the nurse tried to talk me out of it. She was like, you're 30, you're losing, she told me, you are losing your womanhood. You are not going to be a proper woman after you've had this anymore. You're not a woman. And I really need to do something about this son. Those were the words that she used. And my mum, I'd taken my mum with me, and we were both like completely disgusted. And we got in, and she was like, you've got to keep your cervix, you've got to keep your cervix, it's the most important part of you that there is, you need to keep it, don't let them take it, don't let them take it. And I was like, I'm going to let them take it, because it's a useless thing, it's like for keeping babies in, I don't want any more babies, I won't have a womb, I don't need it. Anyway, I got into the lift at the hospital, the elevator, and I burst into tears, and I said to my mum, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. You know, I don't know if this is a mistake. And my mum said, because she's had one, and she went, don't, just do it. It'll be the best thing that you've ever done. Don't listen to that woman. She's talking a load of rubbish. You know, I had it all whipped out. Just don't worry about it. So on the day, my consultant came round and he spoke to me, and I said, are you planning to remove my cervix? And he went, well, yeah. And I was like, oh, because one of the nurses was like really adamant that I shouldn't have it done. It's like a massive mistake and I should try and keep it. And he went to me, I'm going to put it this way. If I take it out, you can never get cervical cancer. So what do you want me to do? And I went, just take it out. And I woke up from my operation, and it was horrendous, and I immediately thought, oh my god, what have I done? This is like the worst pain ever. I don't know how I'm going to cope with this, you know. But he came round and he was like, I took everything, you know, I've left you your ovaries, so obviously I don't go into the menopause, but it all went really well, and it's all gone, and that's it, you're cured now, sort of thing. And I was like, oh my god, thank you so much, even though I was in all this pain. And I said, you know, did you take my cervix? And he said yes. And he was like, oh, I know you're in a lot of pain now, but give it until about 2 o'clock this afternoon, you're going to start feeling great. And he was totally right. Anyway, I came out of hospital and I went to my parents' house to be looked after. And a couple of days later, I had this letter, and it was from the smear tests, and I was like, ha ha ha, don't need to go for those anymore. Feeling pretty damn smug. Anyway, and then about a week after that, I had another letter, and it was from the hospital, and it said we biopsied everything that we took, and your results for your cervix have come back as abnormal, is how they put it. And the sun is just following me. They said, you've got to come in, and you've got to it's nothing to worry about, because obviously it's gone. You know, your womb was fine, your fallopian tubes were fine, but you need to come back in 6 months, and you need to have, you know, some tests to check that it hasn't, they said that to check that everything else was fine. So I was like, I did cry, which seemed a bit ridiculous because I was crying over something that I didn't even have anymore. But I suppose it was relief, because even though I'd kept up to date with all my smear tests and I'd done everything that I should have, and you know, they had been something that was particularly difficult for me because of the way that my body was made up, and they're particularly unpleasant. But I was like, oh my God, you know, because it didn't even cross my mind that there was something wrong with it. And then, because like as a woman, when you're having lots of like pelvic pain and stomach pain, and you just think, ugh, hormones, and you chalk it down to hormones. When you're feeling bloated and your stomach hurts and whatever, you just go, oh, it's my hormones being crazy. And like I say, I'd always been for my smears and they were always fine. Anyway, so got to October and I hadn't had my letter. So I went to my GP and I said, look, I'm supposed to go back for these tests, but the hospital hasn't contacted me. And she looked at my notes and she went, oh yes, because you had cancerous lesions, didn't you? And I was like, what? You know, I didn't, nobody had actually told me that that was the problem, and she just assumed that I knew. And so she was like, oh, don't worry about it because it's all gone now, but I'll send you for the tests. And so I had to go and I had to have what was essentially like another smear test, but it was just kind of like of what was left. And it was quite painful because I was still sort of like healing up. And anyway, so I had to wait for the results to come back, and fortunately they came back and they're all clear and it's all gone and I don't need any treatment, but I have to go back in another year and like hope that I get the all clear again. And if I get the all clear again, then that's it, you know, I'm fine. And I have to say, I don't feel ill. I don't get stomach pain anymore. I don't get all this, you know, all these problems that I was having before. So basically what I wanted to say was, just go for your smear tests. They are horrendous. Well, they're not horrendous, but they are uncomfortable and they are pretty damn humiliating and awkward, and the nurses are always really nice, and it doesn't matter if you're a virgin, it doesn't matter if you are a lesbian, you still need to go, because it can happen to anybody. Like I say, I'm 31 now, but I was 30 at the time, probably about 29 when all this was going on. So yeah, I just think, go, do it. You need to go and do it, and just suck it up, basically. Though I know it's difficult, and the people that I feel a particular sympathy for are those who still have female parts but do not identify as female, and I suppose that's something that you've got to judge for yourself. But I would say to anybody who has a cervix, go and get your smear tests done. I mean, I turned around and I said to my sister afterwards, I said, you have to promise me now, because she hadn't been going for hers, and I said, you have to promise me now that you're never going to miss one, because if this can happen to me, this can happen to you. And she was like, yeah, don't worry, I you know, I'm on it, sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show how important this is. And I was so damn lucky, because I just dread to think what would have happened if I'd have listened to that nurse and I'd have said, oh yeah, I want to keep that bit, because obviously I wouldn't have been able to go for my smear. I would have missed my smear. And in the space of that time, because, you know, this was in the space of 3 years the one that I'd had before was perfectly normal. In the space of 3 years, how quickly things can go downhill. And I dread to think what would have happened, but it didn't. And I thank my lucky stars that I am fine, and I'm probably healthier than I've ever been before. I don't have to take pain medication for that. I have to take it for other reasons. But even that is a lot less. I mean, I don't have to go to a pain clinic. I'm not anemic anymore. I am just so much better, and I'm so thankful. Yeah, so I'm sorry about the poor quality of this and the rambling and the fact that the sun has been in my eyes, but basically that's my story, and thank you for listening. Bye.